Call to order for a special Watertown budget appropriation meeting for the City Council on October 18th of 2023. Please rise while Councilman Schutte leads us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this new day that we have here to live and to go about the city's business. There's so much to be thankful for. Tonight, I thank you, Lord, for the even as I come in this room tonight, Lord, the joy, the camaraderie within the city, within departments. I just thank you, Lord, for what you have been doing these last 2 years and previous years even to build camaraderie and unity. So I just pray a continuance in that, Lord, continue to build us and grow us together. I also pray, Lord, with thanksgiving for the provisions that you have done, that you've given us, blessed us with over the years, decades, the life of the city from its beginning. Lord, how we've progressed in many ways, and tonight we're going over the budgeting, we're going over the finances, and so we thank you for what you have provided in the past years, and we ask tonight to help us to be good stewards of moving forward, of what you are providing, and to be able to do it appropriately and correctly, and give us the wisdom needed. In your name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Holeen?
Here.
Jurgens?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
Schutte?
Here.
Tupper?
Here.
Bueller? Here. Danforth?
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. The chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Peters. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Now is the time for open forum. If there is anyone here who would like to discuss something in front of the council now that is not on today's agenda, now is your time to do so. I'll close open forum, go on to our business for the day, which is a review and public hearing of the 2024 City Manager's proposed budget. City Manager, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am excited to be here in front of you this afternoon and into the evening to share with you the proposed budget for 2024. I will share along the way kind of how we came to the recommendations that we did. But first, before we get into the actual meat of it, I wanted to show you a video that I shared with the leadership team about 6 months ago. And we've spent considerable time as a leadership team talking about how we function as a team, how we have to view the city as a collective organization while still managing independent departments. And when we put the budget together, we really needed to look at it collectively versus through the lens of our own departments. And I challenged them to think about the first team. Is the team that they are part of as a leadership team as important to them as the teams that they are leading? And in order to have successful, thriving organizations, the leadership team needs to be in sync with each other. And we need to be carrying out the same message to all of our departments and all of our divisions. When we don't do that is where we run into frustrations and confusion and stress. So it's not perfect yet, but it certainly is something that we're working on. And when we watched this and when we talk about first team and then we went into the budget process, I feel it was a much more holistic approach to budgeting versus independent decision making. So if you'll grant me a little leeway, it's just a little 2-minute video. Also, I'm technologically challenged. IT may have to jump in and save me.
On organizational health, this falls squarely within the first discipline, which is building a cohesive team. So if you were to ask any leader in an organization which team was their top priority, the team that they're a member of that runs the organization or the team that they lead, their department, many of them will admit, because this is very natural and understandable, they'll admit that their top priority is actually the team that they lead, not the one that they're a member of. It kind of looks like this. If this is the leadership team, and each member of this team has their own department that they run, it is very natural for this person here to put this team at a higher priority than the leadership team or the executive team. And as natural and understandable as that is, it's very dangerous in an organization. Because when this happens, when every member of this team is prioritizing the team they lead over the team they're a member of, the executive team then becomes like the United Nations or Congress, where everybody is getting together to lobby for their constituents, rather than to come together to make decisions that are for the good of the whole organization. Now, when I confront leaders about this, one of their first objections is, well, how is that going to make these people feel when they find out that they are no longer my top priority? Now, here's the funny thing about that. Do you know who wants this to be the #1 team more than anybody? It's the people that work in this department, and this department, and this department, and every other department that reports into these leaders. Because when this team is not working together, when these people have not made this group their top priority, these people are left to fight bloody and unwinnable battles with one another. Because if these people haven't resolved their differences and left their meetings with clear marching orders for their departments, they cannot possibly succeed. So really, why do these people make this their top priority? Because you know something? They spend more time with these people usually. They've hired those people. They like being the leader of that team. This might be their functional area of expertise. But they have to overcome that and realize that until they can come into this room, leave their departments behind, and become executives for this company and this team, they will never create a healthy organization.
Okay, so there's that. That's sort of our philosophy that we looked at when we were preparing the budget. And before we get into the meat of it, I want to share some numbers with you. What you'll see in front of you, across all funds, expenditures we are proposing to raise by 3.2%, so about $340,000. However, that's offset by projected revenues, which are coming in at about 12%. And again, this is across all funds, including the capital fund. Revenues we're expecting to increase by a little over $500,000. So when you factor all of that together, we're actually presenting a budget to you that is about $180,000 less than the 2023 budget that we're currently operating in. I just thought that was a good statistic to share with you as we are maneuvering through this conversation. So our budget priorities really haven't changed a lot since 2022 or 2023. Our people, so successful union negotiations. We do have tentative agreements with all 3 of our employee unions right now. Keeping wages in line with peer communities and providing opportunities for professional growth. Organizational and structural strategic planning, so identifying future needs and planning for them both as a community and as an organization. Increased expenditures for street maintenance and repairs. We also talked about that last night in the long-term plan. Employee development, so enhanced focus on training, professional and leadership development, creating efficiencies and improved processes to streamline work. And completing with excellence, and I had to go in and change this one because we are very near to completing the ice arena, and we have completed the airport terminal, and we have completed the downtown park. But the last 2 big projects on our plate are City Hall and the street maintenance facility. Also, I will, if you have questions as we go along, please ask them. I think that's easier than waiting until the end. So a little bit about governance policies. So we are governed by our charter, state statutes, the budget that you all approve, a procurement policy, just here's a sample, and governance and ends. I got some questions over the last couple of weeks about different expenditures within the budget, and particularly related to travel, which is certainly fair to ask and discuss. As you all know, we have a council advance. I don't really want to call it a retreat. Retreat means we're moving backwards. But we have a council event coming up in early November. And a significant portion of that time is dedicated to governance policies. So setting the executive limitations that we get to operate under. For example, the procurement policy is a governance policy. You all have said, for example, purchases that are budgeted from $1 to $1,000, here's who can go do it, and here's the process by which you have to use it. And I share this other one. It is simply an example, and I don't expect you to read it. It's very tiny. But these are things that help us as staff administer the goals that you set as a council. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So the big thing that always comes up in the budget is full-time equivalents. So new positions that are requested and what's being recommended in the budget. This year, we had requests for a public information officer, IT help desk, firefighter EMT, fire prevention officer, and a fleet maintenance manager. We also had a solid waste supervisor and the ice technician. You all took action earlier this year to go ahead and approve those already. What is recommended in 2024 is 3 FTEs, public information officer, firefighter EMT, and an IT help desk position.
City Manager
Question?
Mack, could
Yeah.
you explain what your job description would be for the public information officer?
You bet. I will give a very high level. So the public information officer will perform a wide variety of public relations, media, marketing, technical, and administrative support. This role coordinates citywide inbound and outbound communications, including communications of a confidential nature, and is responsible for management of the city's website, social media presence, government channel, and press relations in collaborations with other departments and outside agencies. This is a direct reflection of the conversations that we had during strategic planning about telling our story better and marketing our community and the work that we're doing in a different and more productive way. Questions? Councilman Jurgens, you keep looking at me like you have something to say. Okay.
As with last night, City Manager Mack, don't solicit questions.
But I don't want it. I mean, okay. I'll be careful what I ask for, I guess. So, all right.
I was in, excuse me, Mayor.
Yeah.
Is it good? She invited. I was reflecting on a recent conference that I was at a meeting where the whole hour was spent talking about public information officers and what they do for your communities. And, she was doing most of her work in Sioux Falls, which is a fairly large community. That's it.
Thank you. Okay. All right. The general fund. So personnel services of the general fund are about 63%. I did look in 2023, they were 62%. Operating expenses are 35% and capital outlay is 2%. General fund revenues, here are some significant changes. We're expecting an increase in property tax revenue of about $174,000. We do expect an increase in our sales and use tax for about $660,000. We are transferring in from solid waste an additional $589,000. Our ambulance charges at $150,000, and we expect our building permits to increase by about $75,000.
How confident are you with the building permit increase when we're seeing all over the area right now? I mean, if you looked at the report on Sioux Falls not too long ago, last year they were at a certain time they were at 1.7 billion, and now they're only at roughly 800,000. So, where do we get our? I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Put it that way, but where do we find our confidence in that?
The way that we're currently tracking, I don't believe we've seen a significant change like some other communities have. And again, we project revenues on the low side, just to make sure we have that buffer. So, and if someone from community development or public works wants to speak to that, you sure can.
Director Von Eye?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you for that question, Councilman. The part of the equation there is the reflection of our building permitting rates. We did do an update to them. I'll call it an update because it had been a long while since we've really gotten them to a level of fee for the services the staff provide in reviewing and processing building permits in relation to other communities and their fees. And we did that a pretty substantial upgrade. Was it a year or 2 years ago now? 2 years ago now that we did that upgrade. There will be minor upgrade again in this upcoming, I think it's November, Kristen, when we bring the next fee resolution forward. Nothing significant, but enough that part of that is reflected in that, keeping the fees upgraded for the building permits.
Maybe this isn't the time and place, but do you have an idea where we're at compared to this time last year?
I do not, but Community Development Manager Hanton does, and I could invite her up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Heath. I'm glad I put these numbers together. So as far as in 2022, we had a building valuation of 107.57 million, and we collected $277,247 dollars in fees. And then this year, where we're sitting today, we have a valuation of 79.47 million in building permit valuations, and then the fees collected have been 262,815. So we are about 30 million less than in 2022, but only, math here, 15,000 behind that. And a significant reason for that is in 2022, when we increased the building permit fees, we implemented that commercial building permits had a plan review fee of 50% of the building permit valuation and cost, the fee altogether. And that is in line with many communities throughout the nation and South Dakota on a smaller scale. So,
And
Follow up?
does that have anything to do with also the ice arena permit? Total dollars?
yes, but so actually, and that does contribute to it, because then we did not collect a fee with that being a city project. But then the valuation's still showing that much higher.
So that explains it also. Thank you very much for that information. So,
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. All right, general fund, personnel. So some significant changes. We've already talked about the request to add the firefighter help desk administrator and the public information officer. We are administratively shifting the costs of the public works admin to its own budget line item. Currently, all of that is being tracked through the engineering division. So we're just separating it out so we have a better handle on what those costs are. We have removed the City Hall maintenance position. We were splitting that position between several buildings and have moved to contracted services. The budget also accounts for a 5% cost of living adjustment and step movement, and we're also budgeting for an 8% health insurance increase. Our renewal actually came in at a little under 6%, but we'd like to keep the 8% in there just to account for any changes we might have throughout the year if an employee goes from single to family, if we hire new people at the family rate, et cetera. Questions on that? Okay. General fund operating. So what we would consider some significant changes. We moved the attorney from personnel services to outside legal services. So we're not increasing the budget by 120,000. We're shifting from personnel to contracted services. Again, we've moved the cleaning services to outside labor, increasing the engineering services, which are professional contracts that we enter into, building maintenance at the PD. Billing services for Image Trend for our ambulance is increasing by about 45,000. Street division, motor fuel and lubricants increasing. Our transfer to the Park and Rec Fund, we're actually decreasing by 450,000. If I remember correctly, we traditionally transfer in about $1 million. Is that correct? $2 million. So we're decreasing that, which we're happy to do, but we are increasing our transfer out to the airport by $500,000. Some of those federal grant dollars that we received during COVID have expired, and so those costs are now ours.
Councilman Peters?
City Manager Mack, is that transfer to the airport for operating expenses? That
Yes.
500,000? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Other questions?
In regard to the Park and Rec decrease, is that being offset somehow with revenue coming in from Park and Rec from some other?
It is, yes.
And we will get to that later.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just guessing.
Also,
that-
if any of you have specific department or division questions, just let me know. We have the best team in show business here tonight, so they can all provide a great level of detail for all of you. General fund capital outlay, we have computers and equipment, which we do every year. Officer equipment at the PD, our GPS equipment for engineering, some fire department equipment, bunker gear, things like that, ambulance equipment, mower and foundation strips at the cemetery, tree inventory at the forestry division, and then library books at 82,000, which, as we mentioned last night, that's a pretty consistent number year over year that we spend on cycling out and bringing in new material. Questions? Okay. All right. Park and Rec Fund. So personnel services account for about 66% of this fund. 32% are related to operating and 2% is capital outlay. Some significant changes from revenues. Our transfer in, as I mentioned, from the general fund is decreasing by about 450,000. We are increasing the transfer in from the triple B tax by 100,000. We expect fees for our youth football program to increase, our golf fees to increase, golf concessions to increase, zoo admissions, our ice rentals increasing, concessions at the ice arena, and then campground rentals at City Park.
Councilman Tupper?
Most of these fees well, there's basically an increase in everything. Is that due to a fee schedule change or just overall what we've seen this year and
It's both. Some of it is just higher usage of some of the facilities. And when we bring the fee schedule later this year, some of it will reflect increase in rates.
Okay, thank you.
City Manager Mack?
Yeah.
Golf concession increase of 80,000, that seems optimistic.
I'll let our Park and Rec Director speak to that if he'd like.
While he's coming up, I'd like to say something about the BBB sales tax fund increase into the Park and Rec. That I can get behind. Working with the CVB as I do, I know Park and Rec provides a lot of good services to the community that brings people into the community from outside, and that actually does directly contribute to the triple B tax. So to me, this makes sense that we are funding them at least in part for a service that they provide. Thank you.
To your question, and evening, Mayor, Council. Yeah, that is an increase. Partially, that is due to, in the past, some of the inventory in the Golf Pro Shop and what have you was not coming to the city when that management was private. Some of that money went into there. So that is going to account for a good portion of that increase.
Okay. Thank you. As we mentioned, you all approved the maintenance tech position earlier this year for the ice arena, and we've increased part-time wages for ice arena operations.
Councilman Danforth?
Yeah. Manager Mack,
Yeah.
when it comes to part-time help, seasonal help, but you know, whatever that, well, we got two different kinds. We got kind of like the full-time part-timers, and we also have the seasonal help. Do we have a kind of a standard starting wage or a progressive wage for seasonal help or part-time help?
So Park and Rec has established a seasonal part-time matrix, and I don't recall the starting wage on that off the top of my head. The other departments and divisions, we've not created that yet, but I think it's $14 an hour is where we traditionally start people, unless the department requests to the manager to start someone higher than that.
The wage matrix that city manager is referencing, staff and I put that together last year. There's 5 different categories within that, so it's based on the responsibilities of each position, and the starting wage, will fluctuate based on those 5 different categories. So again, it's position dependent, but we can certainly share that if you're interested.
Have you, Dusty, did you have across the board, have you guys had good luck getting all the part-time help that you need for the various, I hear different stories.
It can be a challenge, still at times. We currently have some full-time positions that were, a little shorter on applicants than we would like to be at this point. But in general, with the wage increase over the summer, we were in a much better position. We were fully staffed at the aquatic center, lifeguards and attendants and cashiers and everything else. We were fairly well staffed, in the parks division and all around. So, there are still challenges out there, but we're in better shape than we were in the past.
Councilman Tupper.
Director Roddick, just a quick question. We all know what it's like to try to hire employees, especially when you're talking about seasonal employees. Let's say you have a repeat seasonal employee that keeps coming back every summer. How do we treat them different, or should be treating them differently? So,
Right. Within that wage matrix, there is a range. So, we've created a range for each category, and, as they return, they can move through that range.
Right. Operations. We do anticipate increasing the utilities at the ice arena just due to the new facility. And we did have to increase our water line item in park system because of Foundation Plaza. Capital outlay, and you may be interested in hearing from Dusty here, but just some different things that we're proposing to do within the Park and Rec budget. General building improvements, equipment replacement, golf course mower, a blower unit at the golf course, replacing some equipment at the aquatic center, the Discovery Center furnace at the zoo, generators at the zoo, a skid steer attachment, adding a pollinator area in Riverside, shooting range shed, and some ADA accessibility improvements throughout the park system.
Councilman Peters.
On the shooting range, is that for the shooting range south of town? Is that not a GFP?
No, it is. It's
Operate.
a city facility.
Okay.
It was built with GFP funds, partly at least.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. The Bed, Board, and Booze Fund, the Triple B Fund. On the revenue side, we are expecting to see about a $100,000 increase in revenue there. The expenditures, what we contribute or pay out to the Watertown Event Center, we're looking at decreasing by about $1,800, increasing the contribution to the CVB, and then, as we've talked about, increasing our transfer out to Park and Rec by $100,000. Bueller, giving me a look. Okay, all right. All right, Prairie Lakes Wellness Center, 65% is personnel, 34 operating, and 1% capital outlay. No significant changes in revenue here. And as Teresa mentioned last night, we have the highest number of members since the facility is opened. So that is great and a testament to the not only Park and Rec leadership, but Teresa's guiding of that very big ship. And no significant changes are being recommended as it relates to personnel. Operating, seeing some increase in chemical, drug, and lab supplies, and some building maintenance, just general building maintenance. Capital outlay, we're proposing to resurface the gym floors in 2024. All right. Casualty Reserve Fund. This is a fund we keep. It's got $15,000 in it. Should we have some kind of incident that is not covered by our insurance? I don't think we've ever had to use that. Yeah. So, no changes there. Capital Improvement Fund. So 65% of this is capital outlay. 32% is debt service. So as we mentioned last night, we have to pay our debt first. And then we get to do things with the rest of the money, and then other ancillary expenditures at 3%. All right. Fund revenues, we are, like we mentioned, expecting to see an increase. That's at 3% that we conservatively budget for, which will net another $660,000. Capital Improvement Fund expenditures. Proposed expenditures, street system improvements at $7.1 million, storm sewer and flood control, recreational facility improvements at $2.4, industrial park and other, that other includes the event center. Debt service, our annual payments is about $5.6 million, and then transfers out. All right. Street system improvements. So we are proposing to increase the street improvements, the mill and overlay budget by $1 million, the neighborhood street improvements by $1 million, the pavement rehab and patching by $300,000, and there's a few vehicles and small pieces of equipment that need to be replaced. Rec facility improvements. Cemetery improvements for $100,000, park and playground improvements, pickleball courts. You all asked about that last night. Here it is. And congratulations to them on their grant they just got from the Community Foundation. The bike trail expansion, about $317,000, and then zoo improvements for $300,000. Councilman Shetty.
Councilman Shetty, sorry.
Just a quick question on the park playground improvement. ADA, where are we at as far as in the city with ADA, a campground or some playground equipment that meets those standards?
I'll have our Park and Rec Director speak to that.
Thank you. Could you repeat the question, because I didn't quite understand
Sure,
where you were
just
going?
as far as, there's different setups, for playground equipment, and as far as ADA, as far as for youth or children with disabilities, what do we have some parks that are set apart just for that, or where are we sitting on that?
Okay, thank you. Obviously, with the Foundation Plaza Park, there's some accessible equipment in there. The Optimist Club was also funded some equipment in McKinley Park in the past. So there's a series of equipment in McKinley Park, and I'm going to anticipate with the Park Master Plan, one of the things that we're proposing is going to be created a destination park playground for people with disabilities. We have a good foundation at McKinley Park, so that would likely be, we would build off of that and just create a larger site specifically for people with disabilities. That's pretty much the way the industry has gone. In the past, it's like, well, let's put an accessible piece at every playground scattered, around. Well, somebody with, challenges, they get to that playground and go, well, yay, there's one thing I can play on. Whereas if you, build a system, there's multiple pieces of equipment that they can enjoy, so.
Follow up, Councilman?
Yeah, thank you for that, because, as I looked at some of ours that I believed had some of that, that's kind of what I was wondering was, well, there's some equipment there, but there's probably room for improvement, so I do appreciate your looking into that, because that'll be a good asset for the community.
Thank you. Councilman Jerns.
Dusty, as long as you're here, I don't know if this will go to you or Amanda, but the pickleball. Last night I heard a little bit of that discussion about pickleball, and it's kind of like pets. You mess with people's pets, and they're going to start calling the city. And they're going to start calling us out in the community. Well, pickleball's turning into that same thing. Just for public knowledge and for our knowledge, the 450, is that to this project that it looks like the private sector's working on in coordination with us, maybe to be located up by the rec center?
Yes, so this is a great example of a public-private partnership. The pickleball enthusiasts approached us last year, might have been the year before, with a desire to have a new outdoor facility. We anticipate the cost to be, about $800,000?
850,000 in that range.
Yep. And so in looking at our budget, and it was nowhere in the CIP or long-range plan or anything like that, we think we can cover a good chunk of that, but you're going to have to cover the rest. And they committed to that. It's currently under design with Mammoth.
Yes.
I believe, is the crew that's designing that. And hopefully we'll be able to, break ground and get this thing done in the spring. I think their fundraising is going well by all accounts. And so it's going to be a great facility when it's done.
Follow-up, Councilman?
Yeah, they're working hard. They're knocking on doors.
Yeah.
Adding on to that, will construction wait until the enthusiasts raise their portion of the money, or will we go ahead with it?
So that's the way it is scheduled to go. Now, we could bring in a budget amendment to you all in the future. Hey, they're close, they're not quite there, we want to get this thing done. We could enter into an agreement with them that they would pay back, their commitment. Or you could say, hey, revenues are looking good, we'll just cover this. We'll just cover whatever the shortfall is. Right now, we're not scheduled to do any work until the entirety of the funds are raised.
If I may add to that, speaking with the pickleball group, they have committed to obviously a lot of fundraising. I think to date they're nearly 300,000 in pledges, so they're close, and it's great to hear that they're actively looking for additional funds. They also had committed to, when it comes time, if we need to, we will take a loan. Again, they have pledges over 5 years, so they may at least take the loan out to cover those pledges. So our hope is that they're successful when it comes time to turn some dirt.
All right, thank you. Councilman Peters.
Just a quick question. Is the pickleball group, do they have, are they a 501c3 or they do have a
Yes.
status? Okay.
Yep.
Just curiosity. Thank you.
Anything else on rec facility improvements? No? Okay. Capital Improvement Fund, this is industrial park and other infrastructure. This is where we annually plan for our GIS mapping that we work with First District on. And the other improvements would be out at the event center. They have some significant needs. And for the life of me, it is escaping me what specifically we're going to be doing in 2024. HVAC and tables, that is it. There's some needs out there that we're trying to build into the long-term plan as well. So, yeah, the air walls, technology.
I'll go to Councilman Tupper, but Manager Mack, after you answer his question, a brief description of our association with the event center might be a good thing to do for the community of Watertown who might not know what our connection is, because it's a city building, which it is, but it's not city-run.
So, yes, so we own the facility, and we have entered into a management agreement to run the event center portion. The contract that we currently have in place basically states that any and all improvements to that facility are the city's responsibility.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
This is just one for Finance Director Bob Zine. Have we retired that bond on that?
Yes, we have not taken out property taxes on that for the last 2 years, and it was paid off this year. So,
Okay, thanks. Thank you. That's just good knowledge for the community to know that has been retired, so.
Other questions on that? You are less lively today than you were last night. It is hot here. I'm sorry about that. The E991 fund, 85% of that is personnel, 7% capital outlay, and about 13% are operating expenses. The fund revenues, we're going to transfer in from the Fund 212 about $50,000. I can tell you that our police leadership and the 911 center manager have been working on the state level to increase some of those fees that are paid into the 911 fund, so we can help offset some of these transfers in the future. But that takes some time and is out of our control.
Councilman Tupper.
Just a quick comment, and I think maybe a couple of you other council people have been there. You ever get the opportunity, you can check with Director Van Duzen back there, but go over there and spend about 3 hours and see how that place operates, because it's just amazing. So the number of calls they get through there and how that's handled, it's just, first 2 hours I spent in there one night, I thought, God, this is kind of boring. And then all of a sudden the phone started ringing, and boy, they were going every which direction. It was very, very impressive. So I just challenge you to take that time to do that. So.
Okay. No significant changes in personnel. No significant changes in operations. And there are no capital outlay expenditures that we're planning for 2024. You'll see 2021 for you newbies. That's when we brought on the 911 center manager and did some improvements to the facility itself. So that's why that number is significant. Okay. Moving on, the library fines fund. Operating is 72% of that, and capital outlay is 28%. No significant changes in revenue. People are turning their books in on time. No significant changes in, I'm not sure why it says increase 164%. I don't know where that came from. I'm very sorry. And there's also no proposed purchases for capital outlay in 2024.
Question regarding the library, just for general information. I know that you don't have to be a member of the library in order to visit there and get online, but in order to check out books and a few other things you do. I'm just wondering how many people in Watertown and the community have library cards?
Go ahead.
In the region. I know that there's a difference between in the city and in the region, but.
I'm trying to remember from our annual report last year, but I believe it was somewhere around 9,400.
Thank you.
TIF funds. All TIF revenues and expenditures are budgeted using projected property tax revenues. They're shown as either debt service, so we're paying off loans, or contributions, pay as you go. If you have specific questions about the TIFs, our finance officer is the one to answer them. None. All right. Okay. The wastewater fund, let's see here. Capital outlay is 89% of that. Personnel is about 4%, operating is 6%, and debt service is 1%. Some significant changes in revenue. We see the charges for collections increasing, sewer consumption charges increasing, revenue for servicing the debt increasing, and our capital contribution increasing. And that is largely related to the programmatic rate increases that we approve annually. I think pizza's here if anybody wants to take a break. No significant changes in personnel. Things staying the same there. Operating, we're transferring out to the general fund an additional $362,000. and capital outlay. We're proposing the lift station for $3 million and then our $25 million in collection improvements.
Councilman Tupper?
How do we calculate the transfers back out to the general fund?
This year, we calculated it at 15%. There is no real standard or metric. We try to be conservative with that. 15%.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. Amanda, how does that affect, I mean, I would assume it takes a period of time for them to accumulate those funds at wastewater. How will that affect them if they need money down the road? They won't have that.
The transfer, you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how would they, I'm not saying they won't, but if you're showing me this, I'm asking, how are they going to deal with that down the road after those funds are pulled away?
Well, so you remember that, I mean, wastewater is an enterprise fund, so the rates cover their operations. The reason we transfer money from wastewater and solid waste into the general fund is because they're not paying for their own HR, they're not paying for their own IT, they're not paying for their own finance, they're not paying for their own city manager. So it is to help cover the costs that the general fund absorbs that allows them to operate.
Follow-up, Councilman?
Thanks, Mayor. Do we do that all the time? I guess
Every
I don't
year.
recall.
Yep.
Do we do it every year? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
City Manager Mack, does the 15% revenue coming back into the city, does that happen as the funds come in, or is it one lump sum at the end of a year?
Go ahead.
It's set up as a transfer. It happens every month. So
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Councilman Beeler?
Just one more.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Is this the most we've ever pulled away from there?
I think 15% is, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And that transfer is factored into the rates. So we're not going to raise rates to cover the transfer, if that makes sense. Okay. Solid waste, personnel 27%, capital outlay 38%, operating expenditures 33%. Revenues, collections increase about 27,000, tipping fees increase of about 106,000. Personnel, no significant changes in personnel. Operating, some foam polymer, excuse me, for 11,000, and then transferring out to the general fund, that 15%.
Councilman Tupper?
So when we say there's no personnel changes, and I know we're going through, and maybe that was covered earlier, we're going through and we had Mike retire.
Yeah.
He was covering 2 jobs.
Yep.
And now we're going to.
We're not reflecting it in 24 because it's already reflected in 23.
Okay, thank you.
Capital outlay, some dumpsters and carts, and then machinery and equipment. If you want to give a detail on what that equipment is, Director Von Eye, that'd be great.
Actually, I could pass it off to Acting Superintendent Craig Mitchell, if I could, on the machinery equipment end.
So for 2024, the capital items that we have, the bulk of it on the landfill side of things, or on the collection side of things, excuse me, would be $387,000 for a garbage truck, and then we have some refuse and containers in there. And then on the other one, on the recycling, we also have another recycling truck or an automated collection truck, and then some containers for that too. And that's our capital items for 2024. And then at the landfill, there are, let's see if I move to that. At the landfill, there's a loader for $300,000. We have a permit required tier 2 assessment. And then there's a 3/4 ton pickup that we would be purchasing for the landfill.
Any questions on that? Okay. Airport, let's see, 69% capital outlay, 17% operating, and 14% personnel. Revenues, about $2.5 million in grants that we're expecting to receive from the FAA. Personnel, no significant changes in personnel. Operating, an increase in utilities due to the larger terminal of about $60,000. And capital outlay, looking at purchasing a tractor and the runway construction for $2.6 million. Any questions about that?
Councilman Tupper?
Wasn't there talk at one time, and I don't know if it was, do we charge, any time a plane comes in, do we charge, is there a fee?
Go ahead.
I know there was some talk at one time of changing something there, and I can't remember exactly what it was, so.
Yes, we have a landing fee for the larger aircraft, Denver Air. It's 75 cents per 1,000 pounds. So we get a monthly check from Denver every month for the landing fee.
Is there anything on any other planes, or isn't that a normal process in any airport?
It's a normal price at all the airports. It's the larger aircraft, the smaller aircraft, the general aircraft. We don't have a landing fee for those, no.
Okay. And that's normal in airports? Okay. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thanks. And that is the budget presentation. Any questions, discussion? If you'd like to take a break and grab some pizza and then dive into discussion, that would be fine too. Okay.
Council? I don't see any reason to take a break. That's-
It's kind of a domino effect. So.
I'm worried about Randy.
I'm open to taking a break if you want, but I'm waiting for some questions first. Okay, 5-minute break.
Whitehorn.
And thank you.
You are welcome.
And thank you for the camaraderie. It's nice to see the departments getting together. I know that that has not always been the case up here, so I think the culture that you have tried to create, City Manager Mack, and I think that everyone has bought into that. I'd also like to officially rescind my recommendation to cut the Watertown Fire Rescue budget after Assistant Chief Youngblood did bring donuts today. So.
Duly noted.
So
Duly noted.
that's one big thing we don't have to tackle right now. But I'm not aware of the others. So, council, we are open for questions and comments and discussion upon the budget. I would like to say something that the proposed or the budget presentation is slightly different than the proposed budget that we have here. I believe some of the questions might come from the presentation and some might come from this. I will not limit either, but I will open it up for any. Council. Councilman Danforth, why don't you start with? Oh.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a donut in my mouth when you said that. So,
City Manager Mack, do you happen to have this proposed budget on the computer?
Sure.
It might, I'm not sure, but the people who are watching might appreciate having that as well. Yes, it is attached to the agenda. So, council, if you are asking something specific on a page and an item, it would help everyone if you cited that.
Mayor, if I may,
Councilman Danforth.
on page 19. It's been talked about a little bit in the presentation, but Manager Mack, we have an office specialist position. I don't know whether that's an additional FTE or
No,
just a change
it's just a change
responsibilities, I
of
think.
responsibilities and moving them into the city manager's budget.
And I know that you have had some discussion with some individuals in regards to travel and expenses related to travel. I know each department has this, but what do we have for policy regarding the planning for that, other than budget dollars? And what do we have for a requirement on reporting after the fact of what took place and the benefits and report of plus the turning in of expenses for reimbursement or payment?
So the first question, it varies by department, how they determine which of their employees are going to what training and when they're traveling. I don't get into the weeds on what firefighters are going to what training or what street maintenance workers are going. I leave that up to their managers. As it relates to my leadership team, they typically will share with me, hey, I'm going to this conference or I'm attending this event. And through the course of our relational work, they share what they learn. And there are some times when they've brought, hey, what do you think about this? In fact, I've proposed some things to the leadership team. Hey, what do you think if we participated in this as a group? And yeah, I think there's value in that, or no, I don't think the time is right. As it relates to reimbursements, we do have a process. We have a form that you fill out. We do a per diem reimbursement. There's an in-state and out-of-state rate for meals. We cover hotel. We pay the federal rate for mileage if a personal vehicle is used, and that all goes through the finance office through a pretty systematic process.
So is all that documented in policy? Or is it just?
I guess I'm not quite understanding what you're asking. Some of travel is related to professional licensure, which we require for certain positions. It's related to credentialing, which we often will list as either a requirement or a preferred requirement when we're hiring people. Some of it's related to certifications. Our wastewater operators are required to have a certain level of certifications from the state. And so sometimes we have to send them to Aberdeen or Sioux Falls or Pierre or Rapid City to complete those courses. So some of it is dictated by the job itself. But a formal written departmental policy on who gets to travel and what they're traveling for, I don't believe that exists.
Well, I don't know if anybody else had any comments, but I'll leave it for right now, Mayor, but it would seem like, in the world that I came from, and it seems appropriate here, is anytime I traveled, I had to document why I was traveling and get it approved. Budget-wise, it was always approved. But then when it came time, it was, okay, I'm going to go here, here's why I'm going. Whatever the reason is.
Well, I'm fairly confident that is the process we're using. I just don't know that it's written anywhere. I mean, anyone back here can comment, but people aren't just taking a city vehicle and driving off without some kind of approval. So, so there is a system in place. If it's written down for each department, that I couldn't tell you. And we do have guidelines in our personnel manual on travel and what's appropriate for expenditures when you're traveling and what's not, and how you submit for reimbursement. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
I'm not sure either.
Mr. Mayor,
Director Von Eye.
Manager Mack, if you didn't. From the public works standpoint, for some context, like most departments in public works, there are a lot of certification and licensure requirements. And so each one of our dollar amounts for travel, and I think it's broken down into a couple different line items: travel and professional memberships, maybe there's
workshops.
And workshops. So like in public works, you have the wastewater operators that are required to be certified by the state. They're required to have a certain number of training hours every year and report on those every few years. They have to report on the training that they've received in order to renew those certifications from the state. The engineering division, same thing. Licensed professional engineers are required to have a certain number of PDHs, professional development hours, every 2 years. They're required to have, I believe it's at 30 hours. So both Justin and I fall under that requirement. The street division, they have certain MSHA training requirements that they have to go to for mining safety, access into gravel pits and things like that, that the street division operate under. But so every one of our line items in the Public Works Department are calculated based on the known number of employees that need to have a certain level of training annually. And then we calculate that all out based on the cost for the conference, the cost for the training, the cost for the travel to get there on a per employee necessity basis. And then we follow through with the personnel policy manual on the tracking of those expenses, the cost of those being paid. You know, if it's a hotel in South Dakota, we direct bill that to the city. And then the reimbursements for the travel for the employees is spelled out clearly in the personnel policy manual, as far as if they take their own personal vehicle. For me and my department, we only do that if it's a necessity because the city vehicle is not available. We otherwise encourage a city vehicle is driven because it saves on the reimbursement costs that way. And otherwise submit those reimbursement forms, and everything's tracked on those reimbursement forms as far as the conference or training that was went to, the dates, the location, and things of that nature.
Councilman Peters.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Not to put words in Councilman Danforth's mouth, but I think what he was getting at is more so along the lines of a report or a justification as to why the conference was needed, and I'll add a little bit of flavor to that. When I was with the state of South Dakota and we would go to a conference, we would have to follow that up with a detailed report, and again, this wasn't in law or policy that we had to do this. We just had to make sure it was justified should the legislature or taxpayers say, well, Kyle, why were you in California for X reason? I think that's what we're more so getting at is, if we as council members ever get approached by somebody in the community, you know, why is our staff in a different area? We have a reason. And again, it's not necessarily our business to be wading into what you guys are going to conferences for, but again, it's good to know that it's justified. So then when we're going through this budgeting, you know, we know exactly what we're looking at. Again, I don't know how to put word in Councilman Danforth's mouth.
You know, one way to solidify that request would be through those governance policies that we talked about. You know, the last 3 years, we've had considerable conversations about professional development, growing our organization, developing our people. Perhaps a draft policy is related to professional development, and as part of the manager's annual performance, it's an accounting of you know, what was gained through travel. You know, individual departments should not be, or individual employees should not be submitting those directly to the council, because you manage the manager, and if you want to have, you know, hey, what's the PD spending annually on travel and where are they going, I can certainly get that for you.
Just follow up, Mayor.
Follow up.
And I would also add to that we are absolutely supportive, or I can say for myself, that we want the career enhancement, if you will. You know, we just went to the South Dakota Municipal League as a team, and I thought that was very valuable, very, very good team bonding experience. So we're supportive of that, but in a justified manner.
I would like to continue on the lines of questioning about the travel expenses. And I will start off by saying none of us on the council are against career enhancement. We applaud that, we approve that, we want that. It makes for a better team, a better city, and a better community. Myself and Deputy Mayor Tupper have talked with City Manager Mack about this, and we do understand that it is not the council's position to scrutinize the travel of any or all city employees except for one, which is the city manager. We have had a discussion with City Manager Mack about this. We have requested, and she has agreed, that we will explore a policy as far as proposing the travel ahead of time, getting that at least approved in general, and then having some sort of a report when it comes back as far as what was garnered. Now, that is what we can control. The question that I have is, from your perspective, how does that work with your department heads? So let's say a department head, I'm just going to use, let's say, Park and Rec, for example. So a Park and Rec employee goes to Director Rodick and asks for travel. He approves it or doesn't approve it. Then it goes to him, and then it gets reimbursed. Well, actually, no, it doesn't get reimbursed, because we're approving the budget expense right now for the upcoming year. What I'm wondering about is, how do we get to this number? Because if we
get to this number just like Director Von Eye. We have a certain number of employees. There's a certain level for a vast majority of them. There's either some kind of certification or degree requirement or professional development hours that are required to even do the job that you've hired us to do. So a lot of it is based off of that. If you look at the actual travel budgets, they're pretty light. Mine, I mean, if you want to talk about the city manager, my travel budget is $7,500, and it's been that since I started. My professional workshops budget is $20,000, and that is the most significant one out of all of the departments. We did for quite a long time. We've stopped doing them recently just due to scheduling, but we would do monthly leadership meetings, not just the department heads, but we would bring in the division managers and the supervisors. Sometimes we would bring in a facilitator to work through leadership. Some of those professional workshop dollars pay for books that we all, the Ideal Team Player. my professional workshop budget, I had mentioned to all of you that I'm going through several courses related to union negotiations because all 3 of our contracts are up next year. All of those dollars are accounted for in the professional workshops line item. So I think I understand the desire, and that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, where are you going? What are you doing? Who's going? I would be cautious to say in January, I want a list of everywhere you're going, because sometimes that changes. You know, I attended an event back in August with our airport consultants. That got coded to the airport budget because it was a function of the airport, and it was requested that I attend. We met with outside airlines looking at expanding into other markets. Those are wholly appropriate for the city manager to be part of. We have flown out to Denver twice now to meet with Denver Air Connection, specifically to talk about operations and their needs, our needs, interline agreements with the major airlines. All of that is what I think you would expect me to be doing as the manager. When I went through the individual budgets, specifically related to travel, the street division, forestry, community development, and the rec division of Park and Rec requested nominal increases in travel, and that's directly related to the professional development requirements of their positions. Sometimes fees go up to, you know, take a professional development hour course. So I think there's a way to find a good balance on sharing, you know, what's happening. I wholly trust that if someone from Park and Rec is going to a conference or attending a class, that they're reporting back to their supervisors what they're learning, what the value is. I don't expect them to report that to me. I mean, I can if that's the direction of the council, but I trust that they're making appropriate decisions within the dollars that they've been authorized to spend.
It is not the desire of myself, or nor do I think the council, to micromanage each department head and each city employee, but please do understand from our perspective, we're answering to constituents who do not understand accreditation hours and certification trips. What they see is travel. They might not be able to understand that once an accreditation is earned, then on every trip, especially if you're going with others, there's always social time and things like that. That's what the public sees.
I'm not averse to the questions. I think they're good questions, and if there's a way to share that information back in a more productive way, I'm happy to do that.
So, like I said, I don't want to micromanage, but on behalf of the public, I would be asking for some level of trust but verify. And that is just, if last year's travel budget, or however you want to call it, travel/public accreditation or whatever, call it that, and then it just automatically increases next year and then the year after that based upon inflation or because of the number of employees. I think that the council and the public could deserve, and I know that we've talked about having this in the governance or in our advance that's coming up, but the public is probably not going to be at that meeting. They are watching this one. That's why I want them to know that we, as a council, are paying attention to this.
Right. And any policy that you draft out of that advance, is something that you're going to have to formally approve at a council meeting. But to your point, we don't apply automatic inflationary increases to all of these line items. As I mentioned, there's 4 that requested increases. The rest of them have stayed stagnant largely since 2022. We've not had increases in travel or professional workshops since 2022.
And I hope that all of our staff understands we're not trying to be adversarial on this, but rather, please just try to understand our perspective where we're coming from. Most of us, when we requested to go on a trip, it's slightly more painful than pulling teeth sometimes, depending on the company that you work for.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if you meant as your time on council, because workshops and travel budget.
And I do know that a couple of council people have gone on
Yeah, so
trips.
hopefully we have not made that painful for you. If
No,
we have,
I don't
we got to
think
fix it, so.
Councilman Tupper.
Maybe if I could just get Chief Toomey to come up for a second, maybe we can kind of, is he here? Maybe put a perspective on what Manager Mack's getting at. Chief, if you would, how many hours of travel certification? I know they got to go through a lot of hours of other certification. I mean, I hear them out to the gun range all the time. God, that's just kind of annoying. Can you guys quiet it down a little bit? No, I'm just kidding. But how many hours of certification yearly for recertification or to keep up with their certification does an officer have to do?
A police officer needs 40 hours per every 2 years of training to meet their certification. That is just minuscule what training they need and require to provide public service. I do want to say that we, and I think most departments, do have a justification process. There's a travel and training request that is filled out by each employee. It's scrutinized by their immediate supervisor, that goes to the division supervisor, and ultimately comes up to the chief to either approve or disapprove. Once they go, we do hold them accountable to come back and report to us, and whether it was an individual professional development or something that could be shared with the whole department. So we do get the best we can out of our training budget. And I think I can speak for all the department heads. We're very conservative with that.
I think that just kind of helps put it into perspective of what everybody's trying to get at, because there is some checks and balances when they get back that, you know, as Councilman Peters and Councilman Danforth both stated, when in the business side of the world, when they went on a trip, they had to come back and give a report. So they are reporting back to maybe not so much you as, but their chief or whatever, their head of whichever sent them. And then that gets back to you eventually. Thank you.
Councilman Jurgens.
New guy to the public sector, being in the private sector his whole life. It's really good to hear where the public sector is going versus what the private sector has. And since 2008, those budgets have really been cut. And I think it's just been time out of productivity. A lot of that has gone, our certification has gone to web-based things. And so it's just, maybe educating, not re-educating me, but just educating me on what is different about your profession and your life versus the life someone like me is coming from. And then I know Mayor Holine has alluded to it. When we get questioned in the community, then we have an educated answer. And I haven't had that up to this point because I've had the questions.
One simple answer is that the council adopted a strategic plan that one of the core tenets of it was professional development for the organization. If there's a desire to rein in training, rein in travel, this is the process to do that, to say, make a cut across the board and travel and professional workshops. That's just fine. I don't think, if the desire isn't to micromanage, that it's really appropriate to say you can go to this training but not that one. I mean, that really is up to the purview of the department head, because they know what the needs of that department are. I also think we're talking about two separate things. Like I mentioned, the travel budget itself across the departments is actually pretty light. And to your point, Councilman Jurgens, about online trainings, and I do a lot of my professional development hours online because that is the way, and it's easier. There's two main conferences that I go to annually. One is the ICMA, the International City Managers Association Conference, and the Municipal League Conference. There's some sprinkling of others throughout the year if they come up. A lot of my travel specifically is to peer during the legislative session, because that's where I code mileage to. It's, I can work with you all on if you need some better messaging or better explanations, but there's a lot of stuff that is just part of the day-to-day job that is either coded to professional workshops or it's coded to travel, and it's not, junkets to Florida. So.
Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. I think, in my business career, we always had to justify our travel, and if we wanted to take folks with us, we certainly had to justify who we were bringing, why we were bringing those people with us. And we were always cognizant of, hey, when I'm gone, when they're gone, who's kind of minding the store? Now, I'm not here to say, I'm not saying that any of the travel that you've done you shouldn't have done, but I do think would be something that we need to change in our policy as to who's going, justification for who's going, and I think the staff from their subordinates, and then as well as you, I think probably to the mayor, and certainly wouldn't expect you to have to do that for the full year, in January like you suggested. Yeah. But I think that in business, that's just very, very common. And that way,
I guess
Manager Mack, let him finish his statement.
Thank you. No, just a simple trip report, and certainly we don't want to take a lot of people's time where they got to write reams of paper to say why or what they did or what they accomplished, what their takeaways were from that trip. But in any business I've been associated with, that has always been the case. There has to be a justification for that trip. Boss says okay, or he says thumbs down, and then when you get back, you have to kind of justify why you did it, what your takeaways were from that trip. I think that only makes sense.
I think we're saying the same thing. That is happening. And if you feel like you're not getting that from me as your direct report, then I'm happy to do that. It is happening across the departments. You've heard from 2 department heads who've talked about their process. Their employees ask for permission. They talk about the value of it. Is it worthwhile going? Yes or no. I send out regular updates to the council that includes my, if I'm going somewhere. If you need more than that, you just have to ask me for it. I'm happy to provide that. And, to your point about checking off with the mayor, again, I'm happy to do that, but I work for all 7 of you. And so if you want me to be reporting something differently, it needs to be going to all of you.
No, that would be fine. I just thought as a point of contact, the mayor, if he felt compelled to, send that to the rest of us, fine. But no, I just think some sort of a written document when you're done to justify that travel, what you got from it, I think that would be beneficial. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Director Von Nye.
Can I share a short, fun story that relates to this and the street budget? I went on the National Public Works Association conference here a month or so ago. Took a handful of staff with. Side story with that, it's actually the first national conference that every one of those staff members had ever been to before, except for me. It was a very rewarding experience for them, and a lot of camaraderie was built within the Public Works Department. The fun part, though, one of the sessions I sat in, one of the technical sessions about street maintenance. As I'm sitting there listening to this city presenting about how they've modified, how they look at their street maintenance needs and how they're addressing them, I immediately started to think, I wonder if we shouldn't do something like this in Watertown. And the week after I got back, I went out with Justin Peterson, the assistant city engineer, and I looked at the roads he had planned to mill and overlay in 2024. And what we decided to do essentially ended up pulling and saving $1 million out of that mill and overlay, and instead proceeding with alternate treatment methods that I learned about in this conference that are working successfully in other cities across the country. And we're able to stretch that $1 million now out into other roadways throughout the community. So that's a rare story maybe, and not every conference we go to do we come back with literal $1 million ideas, but in this case, it was a literal $1 million impact I was able to bring back and apply to what we're going to be doing in 2024.
that story right there is exactly why I bring this up. It's not to say I don't want staff to travel or get along or learn something. It's to make it clear to the people of Watertown what they're getting from this travel. That's all they've ever asked. They've asked us, and so we're asking you. This is the first time we've had this discussion. That's why it's a valuable discussion, because if you can show why this is good for Watertown, I'll bet there's a bunch of people who are going to watch this now and say, oh, okay, I understand now, I approve. And then the number of people that ask us about the travel diminishes greatly, and in fact, we probably flip it to where they're saying, great, send them on more trips. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but you can at least understand, it wasn't to make Watertown look bad, ever, or anyone who works for Watertown. You know me, that's never what my intent is. It's to give an opportunity to show the people the good job that I know you're doing, but we have to do it in a public setting like this and not wait for a strategic planning meeting from the city council. So that's why I wanted to have it in public, because I know that you can justify it, and I know you can prove it. So let's have that discussion, because then the public knows that we're doing our job on their behalf and you're doing your job on everyone's behalf. Councilman Tupper.
Public Works Director Von Eye, this is kind of a touchy situation that we're all talking about tonight. And I just want you to think about this and maybe kind of help put this in perspective. This is the first we're hearing about that. And it is pretty impressive what you're saying. So when we're talking about reports, that when people come from a meeting or a conference, if we could have heard about that a long time ago, maybe our perspective of this whole conversation tonight would have been a lot different. There is a lot of value in that. I've been to many conferences over the years, literally probably a couple hundred of them over the years. I've never left one without picking up something. Sometimes we need to ring our own bell, and you save the taxpayers $1 million. That's great. We weren't aware of it until right now, and maybe that's part of the point that we're getting at.
Absolutely. Councilman Danforth.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't think, at least anything that I've heard today, and I don't think anything that I may have heard in the last few days as this topic has maybe been discussed a little bit, I don't think this is a matter of reining in. I think it's a matter of accountability. It really is. Because let me tell you what happens. And what happens is, what aggravates this is social media. Because we're all guilty of going on social media. Next thing you know, we're away from town somewhere, wherever that where is, and we've got any number of staff with us, and we're on the beach, in a bar, having food, whatever. That doesn't present itself well to the public. Because what they see is, now that I know at that point you're on your personal time, but they don't see that favorably. I promise you that, because that's the calls that I get. It isn't that you're gone, but it's the perception that they have that's showing up as a result of social media, which I do believe is a whole nother issue at some point in time that we need to address in regards to social media use for individuals as it relates to being on city business. But I think that's part of the problem that aggravates this. And because I sit there and go, I don't know what they're there for. I don't have a clue. And I'm okay with that. But how do I answer for 4 or 5 people, 6 people being at a conference? That's what's hard. And then they don't see you at a desk or at a table working and having a display in front of them. What they see is the aftermath, the personal time stuff. So that's part of this issue and in accountability. So.
Any further comments on travel? Okay. Oh, City Attorney Carrico.
Yes, my apologies. And I'm sure this isn't lost on the council, but since you talked about educating the public too, I think we also need to remember and I say this more to the public than the council, because again, I realize you guys already know this. You had it in the strategic plan apparently, but this is a competitive market between private sector and public sector. And for public sector employees to know that, at least in part, that the city will help them with professional development and certifications is a plus as to why I would want to work for the city in the public sector. So just keeping up with that competitiveness in the market today. And again, I realize you guys already probably know this, but just thought it was something to mention for the public.
Councilman Tupper.
City Manager Mack, when I was in your office, and me and the mayor were in your office the other day, and I had a hard time saying this statement, I think I know, you know what I was talking about.
Treat people well enough that they want to stay, but train them up so if they leave, they're a good employee to someone else.
No, that's not
No,
very good.
that's what we were talking about. That's the truth.
Although we did.
Because I'm going to get it
That's
wrong
not-
too. That's why.
not- well, that's what we're trying to get at, but that's not the way it goes. So it's train them so they're capable of moving. Not really. That's not the exact words, but treat them well enough that they don't want to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Moving on. Next topic, anyone? Councilman Danforth.
Here I am again. By golly, you opened up the floodgates. Page 23, organizations, external organizations. Amanda, have those reductions or changes been communicated?
Not at this time, no.
It hasn't been?
No.
So this might be the first time they're seeing this?
Yes. And again, they're proposed. You all could say,
Right,
bring them back up to where they were. Mm-hmm.
okay.
You know, we did implement a new application system this year. You all adopted a policy for external organizations. And so we did try hard to apply that policy to the applications that we got. And what's reflected in the proposed budget is based off of that.
Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was noticing earlier that on the Watertown Community Band, just noticed it was cut in half. I'm sure, does it have something to do with, were they getting charged for the use of the showmobile in part of their?
No. Our justification for that, and again, it's just a proposal, is that when we read their application, the city is the only funder of that organization, and they're paying their members to participate. And I don't know at what level. I don't know if it's per event or you just get a flat rate. And you know, a large discussion when we talked about that policy was not paying for operations.
Okay.
So.
Yep. City Manager Mack, I had a question about your presentation.
Yep.
You cited that you're shifting Public Works Administration to its standalone line item?
Yes. So the Public Works Department was reinstated in 2019. And since then, we've been coding all of the administrative personnel, so the director and the executive assistant, to the engineering division. And what we should have done back in 2019, much like Park and Rec has a administrative budget where the leadership is charged to that, we should have done it back in 2019, just to have more accurate representation of what the department costs are versus what the division costs are. So no new budget, it's just we're coding it differently. I wanted to make you aware of that.
Is that akin to creating any new entity in the structure?
No.
Councilman Danforth?
What page am I on? Well, and this might be for Dusty as well here. We talked a little bit about the zoo last night, and I just, and I don't want to beat that one to death here, but there's two types of memberships that we have for revenue. One is memberships, and the other is something else. What is it? I'm gonna try to find that again. Fees, I think. What's the difference between memberships and fees. Are all of those, is some of that coming from the Zoological Society as a reimbursement?
Yes. Memberships are basically our, families, individuals that purchase a yearly membership to attend the zoo. Fees are your daily fees for someone who doesn't choose to get a membership, and they just come and visit the zoo, they pay the daily fee.
So do all of those dollars come to the city? Because there was a point at which I think some of them went to the Zoological Society.
Right. And it's broke down certain classes, and I don't remember off the top of my head, of the memberships go to the Zoological Society. The balance, it might be all the individual memberships go to the Zoological Society. The rest come back to the city.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is as I look at our revenues for the zoo, and I do believe, and I'm not sure that this has really changed, but the last I'd heard is they kind of had an evaluation done of what their market numbers should be for a year. And it seems like the last number I heard was just kind of a cap at 60,000 entrances coming into the zoo. Is that still about a right number?
Yeah, I don't have the attendance
Yeah,
numbers.
I think that's
with
what was
me.
said once, because we're saying, how do we get it up, and then how do we get that membership or the attendance up? They said you're kind of capped, that type of thing. Well, anyway, so if I look at this, our proposed budget is $1.67 million of expenses, and we have, what do we have here? Total revenue of $595,000.
590, I have 637.
Where's that at? Why am I? All right, so 630, okay.
637.
All right, I don't see that in here, but that's okay. Well, the point is we're subsidizing the zoo $1 million a year right now. And that's not including any capital. If we take the 60,000 approximate attendance, and we take that $1 million, we're actually, for every man, woman, and child that comes in there, we're paying them about $18 after they've paid to get in. That's what it costs us per person. And that's the number that I've been really concerned with for years, because it just keeps going up. There was a while it was 10, then it went to 12. Now here we are 4 years later, and we're at 18 bucks. And I just don't know how we're going to be able to sustain that. I really don't, without some kind of a plan, unless everybody is just okay with that number going up and up and up. And I know we're not. We have to have concerns there. But anyway, I know you said last night, and I appreciate your stance and your input on that last night, but it's something we're going to be looking at. I know you have concerns with it, but I just wanted to share that information tonight, because it is concerning to me.
As it is me, just one of the things I will share, and I got his clearance, so Dan Miller is in the process. He'll be retiring at the end of the year. And Dan has served the zoo for many years and very well. So we thought it appropriate to keep Dan involved on a part-time level, and his primary focus on that part-time position is going to be for fundraising. And hopefully specifically to potentially build an endowment that will substantially impact the amount of subsidy that the city is contributing. At least right now, that's the short game plan.
It's kind of one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't things, really, kind of, because it's a great asset, but we just have to recognize what it's costing us. And we're going to work at that and see where we go with that, so.
Councilman Peters?
Just to piggyback off of Councilman Danforth's comments, I'm just looking at this sheet here, Dusty, and when is the last time, the last year, the zoo has turned a profit?
I don't know, but I would guess never.
That was kind of a rhetorical question, but thank you.
Very rhetorical.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, we kind of laugh about that, but we provide a lot of facilities and services that don't turn a profit, largely in the park and rec world, because that's what we're, you know, called to do, is to provide those recreational amenities. If we want them to turn a profit, we need to turn them into an enterprise fund and charge the rates that support the operations, which we know would be incredibly difficult to do specifically for the zoo. So I would just caution, I completely understand the sentiment, but I don't know that any of our park and rec programs turn a profit.
Right. I was going to say the closest one would be the Wellness Center, and Wellness Center is recovering 96% of its operating. You know, for example, the zoo is currently covering 38.1% of its operating, and that does not include anything that the Zoological Society, you know, is providing. So, you know, the golf course, for example, you know, just based on the budget numbers, you know, and proposed from last year to this year, you know, we anticipate the golf course to be at an 80% cost recovery, whereas last year it was proposed at 64%. So, you know, we are working on those cost recovery ratios pretty much across the board. So.
I appreciate. I was being somewhat facetious when I said that. I would say that that was my expectation, is that would probably be a negative. I see this as an asset to Watertown, because what we don't see is people coming in here and spending money on the 2% sales tax, right? It's tourism, so people are coming in here into Watertown to see the zoo. But I also agree with Mike, where, I mean, you know, after so long, $1 million shot in the arm to keep it operating is tough long term.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you know, and along those same lines of cost recovery, you look at the ice arena. You know, currently the cost recovery based on the 23 budget for the ice arena is less than 1%. As we move forward, the budgets that have been submitted with the obviously increase in expense, but with that is an increase in revenue. We will take that from a 0.09% to a 56% cost recovery for that operation. So those are the sort of things that the department is looking at and working on.
well, my daughter likes the monkeys, so we're going to keep funding that thing.
Kind of excited for the penguins to come in the future.
Anything else on, Councilman Beeler, is this on the zoo? Okay.
Love the zoo, love the monkeys.
Anything else on the zoo?
He's a little
Right now.
leery about the otters. Just wanna- oh, that's you.
He hates otters.
Before we change subject, Councilman Shoddy had the next. Yep, different subject. So we're done with the zoo. Moving on.
Well, I would like to see a polar bear. That's kind of my thing, but anyway, that's me. I like Omaha has a good polar bear exhibit. So,
Cha-ching.
Forestry Department. Just curious on an update, I guess. You know, in 2023, we went from 2 to 3 forestry technician ones, and so putting 4 positions instead of 3. An update on how has it helped? I'm sure it has, but how is it from stump removal to trees and getting caught up on trimming, and just the progress we've made with that added position, if we could get updated.
I can let Matt update you on that. I said, I brought him, I might as well let him talk.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to the hot
Yeah.
seat. We're glad to have you.
Thanks. With the added positions, it has been a crazy good change. It's been with us bringing Larry in from Brookings, like Dusty talked about last night. It has turned our forestry department around. If you've driven around town, you see, you know, stumps and when they started stumping this, they started in August. They had over 600 stumps to do, and they are down to about 178, I think Larry said this morning. So with a crew like that, I mean, they're strictly stumping and then taking trees out at City Park and all trees in between.
I do appreciate that, because I knew I wouldn't stump you on that.
Is there a fine associated with that, Mayor? I feel like there should be.
Councilman Tupper.
I know in the past we've hired outside help. Have we used less outside help this year or about the same?
We have outsourced some of the stumping, some of the larger stumps, you know, and cottonwoods that are just too big for the operation that we have. Not a lot of them. I mean, with the stumper that we have and the crew that we have going, it's pretty self-sufficient, so it's saving us that way too.
So you'd say an answer to my question would be we've used outside sources
Yes,
less.
we have,
so,
yep.
Anything else on forestry? Councilman Beeler, you had the next topic?
Yes, thank you. Mine deals with Public Works. If I might visit there he is, right there. Public Works Director Von Eye.
All questions will go through City Manager Mack.
Oh.
If she feels that
About that.
Director
Yes,
Von Eye is the right
that's
one
how
to
I
answer.
Always got to end run you. Anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, this particular one is in regards to consultant services. I'm just curious, that's a almost 53% increase over 23. This is community development, and you know, in 2021 we were at $6,700, and now we're budgeting $40,000 for 2024. Just curious I'm sure there's good justification, but I'm just curious to what that is.
I believe it's related to our contract with First District, but I'll let Director Von Eye and Community Manager Hanton elaborate.
That is exactly correct. Manager Mack, Councilman Beeler, we contract with First District Services located here in Watertown. They're our northeastern COG, provide us a lot of assistance. That assistance has been coded to other divisions of Public Works in the past, and it is primarily related to planning and zoning items and the tracking and processing of those in relation to how we map our plats and that work in GIS. Long story short is that full expense had traditionally been coded to engineering, and since Public Works has been reformed in 2019, and since we've created the Community Development Division, that's just simply a correction where we've moved that money from engineering to community development to more appropriate coding.
Okay, thanks. And if I might follow up, this is a follow-up also for Public Works, whoever you want to shift it over to. But no, this not to beat the travel expense thing, but I noticed that we've got $15,000 in the Street Division Public Works, a 200% increase over last year, and you know, quite a bit over 21 when it was $3,800. What's our justification for that?
It's recoding. Almost everything related to Public Works, unless it was an enterprise fund, has been coded to engineering. And so we're coding things to the appropriate line items, is largely what that is.
With addition to that, for instance, Superintendent Bainan and I were able to take staff to Omaha this year to the American Public Works Association Snow Conference, and that's something that his division had never attended before. That's one example of the professional development that some of the street division staff simply have never had access to or involvement in, that we felt was paramount that they get plugged into. Not on a every year basis will every employee go. That's not at all what that is about, but a select few based on the professional development of each one of those crew members on that street division team. In part is what some of those numbers are as well.
Okay. Amanda, could you tell Heath I said thank you?
Heath, Councilman Bueller says thank you.
The appropriate way of saying that would tell the director, thank. Councilman Danforth.
That's good questions.
I was informed, by the way, that the current ice arena is pronounced Mace after last night.
Mace.
It's the
Oh, thank
first
you.
one's long,
Thank you for
second one's
enlightening
silent.
us.
You know, typical English.
It's a little bit like the phrase that Councilman Tupper and I were working on. I will remember it right in this minute, and then if you ask me an hour from now, I'm gonna say, I don't know, is it Mace or Moss? So I'll try to retain
It's
it.
kind of like Worcestershire.
Worcestershire, yes.
But I do have a question on that, and I brought up, like, what is our proposed use for that building? Come January, it's going to be empty.
Yep.
What are we thinking? I've
So-
heard a number of different things, because I don't think there's anything in the CIP at all for that, correct?
There is not. And as we discussed last night, part of the master park plan is to do an assessment of that facility from an infrastructure perspective. So if you were going to turn it into a field house, here's what we would anticipate costs could look like for that. Here's the improvements you need to make. There's the county has expressed some interest in it. The bus barn has expressed some interest in it. As staff, we've not coalesced around a recommendation because we just don't have enough information yet to know what might make sense for you all to even have a discussion around. And to be honest, we're just trying to get the new ice arena out of the ground and up and running. I do expect that those are 2024 conversations to be had once we have the data from the master park plan.
Do we know how big that building is? Just out of curiosity.
No? Matt probably does. Okay.
Google Maps. Listen to that
It's 1 million square feet. Sorry, I gotta take it back.
Okay. Council, are we off of Mace? City Manager, I had a question. I know that some of these topics have been happening preceding this, and some of them go to the public information officer, the assistant to the city manager, and I know that it is your desire to change job titles with some people. Is that correct? But
Yes.
there will be no new FTE.
So the new FTEs that are proposed in the budget are the three that we talked about: the public information officer, the firefighter EMT, and the IT help desk technician. We are looking at shifting around, as we talked about with the office specialist coming to City Hall. That's a current FTE that exists within the airport budget. So we're going to shift that to City Hall, specifically because one of the largest complaints that we hear is nobody ever answers the phones, which is not entirely true. There's a lot of hyperbole in that. But the executive assistant to the city manager and the city attorney, and who supports the mayor and council, really was hired to help facilitate work, to do special projects. And because of the way that this building is structured and the way that our work is structured, oftentimes whomever is sitting in that seat can't do the job that they were actually hired to do, because they are interrupted consistently by the phone, by people coming in. Or they're at a meeting with the city manager, or they're at, a meeting with the mayor. So there's no one sitting at that front desk. And shifting that FTE will allow for better coverage in the public's building and, help with that. The executive assistant to the city manager is already an existing position. But again, just allowing whomever, and we have Mallory is wonderful. I hope she never leaves. But whomever is sitting in that position, the job description really does talk about project-based work versus administrative work. And so allowing them to do the work that that we advertised and hired them for. When we've done exit interviews with the two who've left in my time, that was the number one frustration. I want to be able to build a database of boards and committee members, and I want to be able to assist with the recodification like you've assigned to me. But when we were putting together the sales tax presentation for the work session, in the 20 minutes that I was sitting there working with Mallory, the phone rang 8 times. So again, just shifting people to better meet the needs of the organization. So that's specific to the city manager's budget.
Okay. There was also, Councilman Danforth? I was just going to ask, there are title changes that you're being requested, which are not impactful of, but the reason why I ask is, number one, you might want to tell the public about them, and number two, the reason why I'm going to ask them will become clear afterwards, because they might in the future years become impactful on the budget, and I just want to make that clear.
Sure. Yeah. So to preface this, we've made, so last year when we presented the budget, we showed that we had made some internal shifting of positions. We took the payroll specialist and turned that into an HR generalist. We took a finance, I think it was Finance Officer 2 was the title, and turned that into our records and licensing manager. We took all of the Office Specialist 1s and moved them to Office Specialist 2s. That was largely a market correction because we couldn't hire people as an Office Specialist 1. We've made shifts within the police department. We took a patrol position and turned it into a sergeant position within the community engagement division. So again, those are all just their title changes, job description, organizational changes. So what we've done for 2023 and then moving into 2024, our records and licensing manager is turning into a city clerk position that will still fall under the finance office. The finance officer still has the responsibility by our charter to sign, all of the resolutions and ordinances that you all approve, but really taking what I would consider the administrative non-number work of the finance office and housing it within one individual. I got to think through because we've done a couple of these. Our finance officer is becoming chief financial officer with a focus largely on long-term planning and financial viability of the city. So that is looking at our TIF agreements, future agreements, what do those look like? How does the city retain revenues from those TIFs? All of our TIFs that were presented earlier in the budget, are pay-as-you-go, and the city doesn't receive any revenue from those until the 20 years is up. So how do we restructure our debt to better meet our needs, really focusing again on forecasting and long-term financial viability of the organization. The last change is the Public Works Director. The title is changing to Assistant City Manager / Public Works Director. The job description reflects the duties that are already being done every day. The charter calls for me to appoint an acting city manager. Almost every department within the city, finance, police, fire, the library, all have assistants. They're the right-hand men or women who help them administer the work of their departments, and that's what's happening. So we're aligning the job descriptions and the titles with the work that's already being done. And to your point about future impacts, the mayor and I had a long conversation earlier today. There may come a day where, if it's me or it's a future city manager who might come to you and say, I'd like to request an assistant city manager. That's your purview to say yes or no. We're not adding a full-time position for that. There may come a day when a city manager comes to you and says, I want to add 3 more people in the parks department. And you can say yes or no. We don't agree with that yet. That day is going to come a lot sooner than some of the others, but those are all budgetary impacts. When we request a new position, so when we requested the ICE technician and when we requested the solid waste manager, those expanded the FTEs of the organization. We brought that to the council for approval. The other shifting that we have done in my entire time here has all been done internally. It's all administrative, and it's all budget neutral. So anytime that there is a budget impact, we bring that to you. And anytime we're requesting new employees, we bring that to you, and those are your decisions to make.
Thank you. And thank you for being proactive about talking about that. I know this has been a topic that we have discussed. Right or wrong, in my mind, creating, whether it's just by title or statute, an assistant city manager is a much larger deal than a city clerk or a lot of other positions. Nothing against any of those other positions, but in the minds of the public, especially just a couple years off of a huge public vote changing our form of government to a city manager form of government, and then having a city manager be able to create, and I know it's not creating a new employee, but creating the job title. The reason why I mention it is because of, let's call it legislative intent. Because I will vote for this budget. And you have 100% the right and the power in your position to create any job title you want. But I don't, in my mind, this is not creating a permanent assistant city manager position, nor should it. And if it ever comes up again, whether I'm mayor or not, I will bring it up that this was not the intent. And I'm saying that now because I don't want this to go through and then 2 years from now, 3 years from now, someone say, well, we already have an assistant city manager. What's wrong with it? Yeah, we do, because we have an exceptional human being filling that role. There's also the question of, if this is a new position, do you have to open it up for applications? And you don't, I know you don't, but.
It's not a new position,
I know,
Mayor.
but I'm saying, it's like, if people perceive it as such, or once it becomes one, people will have that question.
Yep.
And I want to make it clear now so that we are heading off questions that are going to be coming.
Yeah. No, I think that's very good, and certainly open to the conversation. You know, if I or future city managers were to come to you and say, I want to divide this position, I want to retain it as an assistant city manager and hire a different public works director. That's a legislative conversation for you all to have and determine if you support that and if you agree with that. And at such time, much like with our solid waste, this is very, very similar to our solid waste and wastewater. You know, if we had this joint position, and 20 years later, actually longer than that, I think, 27 years later, hey, it doesn't suit the organization anymore to have someone managing both of them. We'd like you to consider allowing us to separate them. That's what the conversation would be in the future if myself or a future city manager thought that that was the right path forward. And at the time, you said, yep, that makes sense. Let's separate it and we'll advertise for that new position. That would be a new position then. When we moved from a payroll specialist to an HR generalist, we did not open that. We did not advertise. We didn't take applications for it. And it's based off of our personnel manual and the union contracts. It wasn't considered promotional in that regard. Trying to think of other examples that are very similar. I certainly understand the political nature of this, but one of the reasons I believe that the community voted for city manager form of government is that they wanted the operations to not be political. So I'm not insensitive to that in any way, shape, or form. But sometimes we just have to make decisions that are right for the operations and right for the organization and right for the people that we have in place. And we've been doing that for the last 2.5 years. So.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth?
I'm looking at Finance Officer Bob Zine, but I'll ask you so that you can ask her.
Okay, thank you.
I have not been able to find the Wellness Center revenues in the book. What page is that on? Ms. Mack, page is that on?
Finance Officer Bob Zine, could you find what page that is on, please?
I have looked and looked, huh? Yeah. Well, is it there? Oh, never mind. Oh, I feel way better. We're both sitting there going, it's not in here, it's not in here.
Council, Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Mayor. So the street department, snow removal on page 39. Just have a question on, well, there'll be two parts to this, but I understand, the ambulance service, for example, a couple pages back, or the police department, as far as budgeting for fuel. There's probably an average. You can kind of look at your ambulance calls. And it fluctuates a little bit. And then there's the cost of fuel. Snow, I guess it's hard to tell what's gonna hit for any given winter. It's kind of hard to do an average for that. So I'm just curious, how do we, and this is going to be a great one for the street superintendent to answer, I suppose, how he comes up with a fuel budget. But last year I noticed that we kind of missed it. Well, we went over, not that he missed it, but probably based off cost and how much snow we got, it was almost $50,000, we almost doubled what we projected. How does that affect a budget just now as a whole in the finance department? When you have a number like that, or particular categories, 50,000 difference of unseen reasons, of course, for snow accumulations. How does that work in the budgeting system when you get a number like that?
So, snow is so hard. So we try to budget based off of 10 to 12 events per season, but every event can be different. And one point of clarity I think is important to make. We talk about this as a budget. It's spending authority. And so we can always come back to the council, particularly as it relates to some of these more erroneous line items that are just really hard to know, and say, hey, we're going to exceed this and we'd like you to authorize additional spending for it. Some of it is just best guessing. Based off of what current rates for fuel are, we expect we're going to spend this. I will say snow is probably one of the trickier ones. You're never going to be exact on snow. So,
right.
Yeah, and I'd rather anticipate high and come in low than, budget what we did last year and miss the mark.
Right. I've seen that was quite a difference, and understandably, but just again, from the budgeting, I guess we just have enough. You just foresee those potentially sometimes. You just kind of got to make the difference halfway through the season, I suppose. So
just to share an anecdote, in one of the first communities I was in, we had a very challenging winter, and I was new in that community, and I knew we in that community really focused on line items versus the total budget. And hey, we're going over on snow, and I had a council member tell me, no one is ever going to complain if you spend more money on snow removal, so just tell us what you need. So for whatever that's worth.
Anything more on snow? Councilman Danforth.
Manager Mack, and Kristen, we used to put a reserve or an amount in specifically for snow. It used to be like $300,000, right?
Yeah, we have
Do we
the
do that
contingency.
anymore?
Mhm.
So that helps us with that budget because it does do this. So we do, I'm assuming that we still do an amount. Is it still $300,000? So, and that's used to supplement that budget if needed. If not, it's carried over or whatever, right? And then reestablished? Okay. While you're looking for that, I just have to let everybody know, and I know I talked about the zoo, but I really do like animals. My wife and I my wife and I donated money to feed the pig at Joy Ranch, and then he died. So I did not get a refund from whatever you feed a pig. I don't know, but he died.
Here are
Even sure
Councilman
where to go from
Danforth.
there. Council?
Page 18 is the contingency account, and again, we're budgeting it at 5%. You will notice that we cannot exceed 5% of our total municipal budget in this account, so that's why we keep it where it's at.
Councilman Tupper?
Just quick question on that, and that can't grow of any year. You can't have a carryover one year and add another 5%. It's got to be a
Correct.
total
Yeah.
5%. Thank you.
Council?
If I remember correctly, I think the only thing we can carry over are capital projects and expenditures. So we can't carry over operating budgets from one year to the next.
Finance Officer Bob Zine?
So the contingency, are we still talking about kind of the contingency account?
Sure.
So we've used that as 300,000 every year. That's just set by state law. You can do a 5% of your budget. So ours is actually very low for what we could do. But since I've been here, 300,000 has always kind of met our needs for those emergency situations. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Shetty?
So, and maybe it's here somewhere else, but does it show, it doesn't show what we actually used out of that, on that form?
It's interesting. So the contingency account cannot actually spend. It just gives authority. So once the council agrees that we're going to basically increase a department's expenditures, that money gets transferred. So that expenditure will actually show in that department. So you'll never see an expense in the contingency. It's just that budget authority is transferred to whatever department needs it.
Follow up then, Mayor? Do we know what we used out of that last year, out of the contingency?
Yeah, so finance does keep, that's actually done by a resolution, and we keep that on file for each contingency that's allowed. It's similar to what we keep on file for any budget supplements that have happened throughout the years.
We don't have that today, though. We don't have that number you're saying.
I don't have that today.
That's
No.
fine. All right, thank you.
Council? Questions, comments? Winding things up. I would like to say something to just say thank you to the city manager, to all the department heads, everyone who helped put this together. There is a lot of hard work that goes into this, and I know that. I've always said I never would have run, nor would I serve as mayor if I had to do the job that you had to putting this together. It's one of the reasons why I support the city manager position. I think it is a good thing for the city of Watertown and going forward. And it is a difficult process. There is a lot of long, hard conversations that go into it, and I want to say that that's not lost on us. I know that it seems like we nitpick it because we take certain parts out of this, and we sometimes can lose perspective upon the whole. And one of the things about the whole that I want to say is, when I look at this, and I think I speak for the council, I don't just see numbers, I see faces, as evidenced from everyone who's showing up in this room today, because their livelihood, their families, their hopes and dreams also depend upon the money that is being spent on the city or by the city. And we're just the final word. You're the one who puts the budget together. So, and I know that you care about the people, you want to treat them well, you want them to stay. I want to say we respect that as well. We see faces behind these numbers, and that's really what this is about, not just for the employees, for the city of Watertown, but for the people that we're serving. So thank you for what you're doing here, and we're still a good team.
Well, of course we are. It's the best team I've ever worked with, and I say that with whole sincerity and heartedness. I feel fortunate every day when I get to walk into this building and work with the people that I get to. And I really meant it when I said at the beginning that we approached this budget as a team and from a holistic perspective of how do we meet the needs of the city, not how do we meet the needs of the individual departments. And I do think that that's reflected in what's been presented to you. The action that you'll take on this will come at the first meeting in November, and it'll be the budget ordinance. So there'll be, most of you have seen what the budget ordinance looks like. It's general fund, here's the dollar revenue fund, here's the dollar. And then the second reading of that will happen at the second meeting of November. And the second meeting of November is when we will also have you take action on the long-term plan for 2025 through 2029.
Councilman Tupper?
I would just like to take time to echo a little bit about what Mayor Holing just said. Each and every one of you in the audience tonight, I mean, you're part of a great team that makes this great little community a little better every day. These are probably some of the hardest hours you put in is when you put this together. We all got lots of wants and needs and dreams, but we all got to come to reality that there's only so many dollars, they only go around so far. I mean, heck, if I had my dream, Don would have a East Side Fire Station tomorrow, but I know that's not going to happen right away. Tim would have 10 more police officers, and Heath would have 4 more employees, but that's just not the way it works. It's not reality. Well, come on, Dusty. You know I'm talking for all of you. Dusty, you're the one that probably needs...
You don't get to give employees out like candy. That isn't how it works.
It's maybe kind of like Halloween. I'm handing out treats right now. So, but I really mean this from my heart. But to speak, hopefully I'm speaking for the whole council. When we approve this, and when it does get approved, we're the ones that answer to the community. We're the ones that have to answer to the voters. We're the ones that put our head out on the block and see if we get it chopped off or not. But we couldn't do it faithfully and feel good about it if it wasn't for the hard work and dedication that each and every person put into this. So thank you.
Council? Thank you very much. Any announcements? Thank goodness.
There is not another council meeting until November. So thank you all for showing up all 3 nights and the work session last week, and we get a little break now.
There is no reason to go into executive session. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Peters. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless you, Watertown.